or even some divine premonition or even a forewarning from God about the situation to come. Let's see. Now the second lie was from Haman. Haman thought that he was all that because he was a trusted advisor of the king, and he felt that he should get the same respect and honor that the king got. So when Mordecai didn't bow down to him when he walked by, instead of handling the situation himself based on the laws of the land, which I suspect he had the right to do based on the law, he had the right to do. He went to the king and told him that none of the Jews were obeying the king's rules and that they should all be killed. Now that was an out-and-out lie. Because Haman had a beef with one Jew, he twisted it to the king and made the king believe that they all needed to die. So now here's the rest of the story, or at least the part that I'm responsible for, up to book 5. Out of all the Jews, only Esther had access to the king. Mordecai persuaded Esther to speak to the king on behalf of the Jewish people, reminding her of her unique place in history, and that in this case, silence was not an option. He tells her in chapter 4, verse 14, "Who knows, but you have come to a royal position for such a time as this."
Jesus.
In other words, Mordecai let Esther know that even her outer beauty was for a reason, and it would not go to waste.
Jesus.
She decided to go to the king, knowing that if he did so without the king actually calling for her, he could put her to death. So before she went, she had Mordecai to gather all the Jewish people to join her in 3 days of fasting and praying. Following the fast, she put on her best robe. You know how we do, ladies, when we want to catch somebody's attention. We get all dialed up.
Yeah.
She approached the king and invited both he and Haman to a banquet 2 days in a row. Now this made Haman's head really big. He went home boasting to his wife and to his friends about how he had favor with the king and the queen, and how he was going to kill Mordecai on a very tall pole and eventually get rid of all the Jewish people. All along not knowing that Queen Esther was a Jew herself. Now, if y'all were watching y'all stories right now, that's when the music would come on and it would say, dun, dun, dun. That's what would happen. On the last day of the feast, Queen Esther told the king that she was a Jew, and she told him of Haman's plot against her people. Now, at this point, I don't want to steal any of Sister Shanae's thunder about the prize. I just want to point out a couple things concerning the lies, and I'll take my seat. In preparing this message, I read somewhere that in this book of Esther, God is never specifically mentioned. Nowhere in the 10 books of Esther do you find the word God. But as I mentioned a bit earlier, I believe that God had somehow prompted Mordecai to instruct Esther not to reveal her heritage. I believe that God had a plan to use her to save his people. He tells us in his words in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29 and 11, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." Now that's enough right there to shout about. Hallelujah. So even though Mordecai and Esther's omission of information might have seemed wrong in your eyes, God had already ordained it and had worked it out for their good. And as for Haman, all I'll say is that just like God tells us in not one book of the Bible, but in 2 books of the Bible. Somebody say 2 books of the Bible.
2 books.
In 1 Chronicles chapter 16 and 22, and in Psalms verse 105 and 15, he says, all right, "Touch my anointed ones and do my prophets no harm." I got to say that again. Touch not my anointed ones and do my prophets no harm. And with that, I'm going to let Sister Shanae come and handle the rest of it. And I ask that you lift her up in prayer as she comes and talks about the prize.